Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
And we're hoping you're having a great day today. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And today our special guest is Marlisa Brown. She is a registered dietitian, certified diabetic educator, author, and chef. She has been president of Total Wellness for more than 2 decades. She specializes in diabetes, gluten-free, obesity, cardiac disorders, and more. She has given hundreds of presentations and has been a guest on numerous culinary shows. Marlisa is a National Speaker Association professional member, past president, media representative, and PR chair of the New York State Diabetic Association, recipient of the 2011 Diabetic Educator of the Year and Emerging Diabetic Leader Award from the Academy of Nutrition and Diabetic Dietitians of the Year from the Long Island Dietetic Association, Best of Long Island Press and Community Service Award from CW Post. So welcome to the show, Marlisa.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
What an impressive bio you have. So you're here really to talk about the celiac disease and gluten-free diet. So tell us, for the listening audience, what is celiac disease?
So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. A lot of people think it's about your gastrointestinal system, but it's autoimmune. And what ends up happening is 50% of the people will suffer from gastrointestinal problems, and a lot of times be told they have IBS, but it's not IBS.
Right.
And
irritable bowel syndrome.
Irritable bowel syndrome. And then the other 50% might have an autoimmune issue that shows up. And it's a tolerance to eating the protein that's gluten. Gluten is the protein that's found in wheat, rye, and barley.
So tell me, when we are talking about celiac disease, is there a difference in celiac disease and being gluten intolerant?
Yes. So celiac disease is the autoimmune disease, as I mentioned.
Right.
But non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and some call it gluten intolerance, is a reaction to the protein gluten that might not necessarily be celiac, and it may not be an autoimmune relationship. They don't have tests for it. It's more of a diagnosis of elimination, and people get usually severe gastrointestinal symptoms or, irritable bowel type of symptoms.
So how does that differentiate from the irritable bowel syndrome?
So generally speaking, when they say that you have irritable bowel or a spastic colon and bathroom-related issues and gas-related issues, it could be because of an intolerance of something you're eating, or because some sort of a microbiome imbalance in your gut, or because of other types of things that you just have problems with in your colon. Whereas gluten intolerance is a reaction to gluten. And sometimes other foods well. So I'll have somebody with gluten and they'll be dairy and they may have another thing on top of it. And my job sometimes is trying to figure out what that is to make them feel better.
So the listening audience, and I'm sure a lot of you as well as I have noticed that we're seeing more and more advertisements for a gluten-free diet. So
Yes.
What is a gluten-free diet?
Okay. So, and again, the prevalence of celiac disease has doubled since the 1950s, and we are getting better at diagnosing it. So that's one reason that we're getting the people that need that for gluten-free. But a gluten-free diet is total avoidance of wheat, rye, and barley. And some people say, well, all right, or I won't eat bread. But it's not just bread, because soy sauce, if it's not a gluten-free soy sauce, can have wheat in it. And so then when you go to an Asian restaurant, it could be a problem. Or sometimes bouillon cubes or bases that they use to make soup could have gluten in it. And so you can't just go out and look at something and say, well, that looks gluten-free because I'm going to eat it. Because if you're one of those people that ends up with really bad gastrointestinal issues, do you really want to have that happen when you're out at a wedding or a restaurant or at a family event? Because it really could be a little embarrassing.
So what are some of the signs and symptoms of being gluten intolerant?
So for the non-celiac gluten sensitivity or the gluten intolerance, usually people will have gas or bloating, or they may have bowel-related issues. So they have to run to the bathroom for an emergency, or they might not be able to go at all. Mostly it's gas, though, and run to the bathroom emergency and pain. That would be the typical symptoms for most people that are suffering from a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And I just want to make a point that's really important, though, because some people, like, they'll do a lot of reading because there's so much information on the internet now, and they self-diagnose themselves, and sometimes they have something serious. Mm-hmm. And by not getting checked to rule out the serious thing, they can let that thing get worse. So it's very important to first find out that you don't have anything really wrong first. Mm-hmm. And then if they can't find anything and they go, well, you have irritable bowel, everything else seems to be fine, we don't know what it is, mm-hmm. then we can start playing around with the diet once you know that there's nothing serious wrong that needs to be addressed.
So what is the biggest challenge, I know, in maintaining you said no wheat, no barley, all of these components are pretty much in so much of what we consume.
Yes.
So what is the biggest challenge you have found in educating?
So, yes, and again, it's different than when my grandmother was alive. She'd be plucking the chickens. There wasn't really anything added. A chicken was a chicken. But today, the biggest challenge is most people are used to eating on the go, going out to eat a lot, going out and socializing a lot with food. And there's two things that take place here. There's the fear of, oh my God, is this okay for me to eat? And a lot of times people say, oh, no, it's gluten-free. Or a chef will say, oh, no, it's gluten-free. And they don't really know that using something else on the grill could contaminate it, or using the same frying oil can contaminate it, or cooking the gluten-free pasta in the same water. A matter of fact, I was on a trip at one of the conferences I was at, and this place went through the whole thing, separate gloves, separate pans, separate pizza, everything separate. And then they slid the pizza right on the regular, not even on a metal thing, right in the stone that they raised the regular pizza on after they did 25 steps to make sure they weren't contaminating, or they stick their hands in the same toppings that they just stuck their hands in. So it's cross-contamination.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about a gluten-free diet for someone who has been diagnosed with celiac disease versus someone who has a celiac intolerance, does the diet differ?
So the gluten insensitivity versus the celiac disease, no, it's still gluten-free, unless it's just a mild issue when they eat a lot of gluten. Sometimes they have a reaction. And in those individuals, if they have no diagnosis for it, we can just reduce the amount.
So the biggest challenge, would you say, is purchasing, going food shopping?
I'd say the biggest challenge is eating out.
Okay.
The second biggest challenge is finding the food you need, especially when you're not close to home where your resources are. So if I'm near my house and I figured out which health food store and which supermarket has the things I like, it's a little bit okay. But if I'm someplace else and I need to pick up something, sometimes it becomes challenging because I go store after store until I find the products that I need.
So I notice a lot of packaging now says gluten-free.
Yes.
Can I depend upon that item without reading the label?
Okay, so the law has just came about just a few years ago on labeling mandatory for gluten-free. Other terms that aren't saying gluten-free, like low gluten and things like that, are not regulated terms. So if something says gluten-free, the rule is it has to have less than 20 parts per million gluten. The problem is not mandatory testing. So if they get caught and it's not 20 parts per million, then, but if they're not testing and they're not careful enough, there could be contamination even in that. Certified gluten-free products have, based on the certification, there's different certifications, have been actually definitely tested. So if you're really concerned, and you're having still symptoms, then I would say get certified gluten-free items.
Certified gluten-free items.
Or, look for general big companies gluten-free. They have more to lose if they get caught. Or make sure there's no cross-contamination in your home, because sometimes people don't realize, they stick their knife in the same peanut butter or put their bread in the same toaster, their gluten-free bread, and they're contaminated and they're thinking it's everything else.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today our special guest is Marlisa Brown. So, Marlisa, that could be very challenging, trying to find food that is gluten-free. Tell me, if I have a visitor, for example, coming over to have a meal, how can I prepare the meal and ensure that it is gluten-free?
So because of the fear factor, a lot of people are going to think just by giving you information, you're still not going to get it all. But so the few things I would do at first is I would talk to the person that's coming over. like open dialogue. This is what I'm planning on making. What are some of the ways that I might be, to make sure I deglutenize it? If I'm going to make a gluten-free dip, for example, and I put regular crackers next to the gluten-free crackers, somebody's going to dip even if you have a spoon there. So they'll tell you things like that so that you can prepare and say, look, I'm only going to put the gluten-free crackers out. I'm not putting regular crackers there as well. Or I'm not putting my crackers on top of the same platter that I have the cheese cut up on. I'll have it in a separate place so that this way there's not that cross-contamination. And the person that has it is going to be the one that's going to be able to help you. And you are probably not going to get the phone call from them for help because they don't want to be in a position. So a lot of times they'll bring their food with you. Yeah. So I'm going to an event. I'm gluten intolerant, by the way.
Are you?
I forgot to tell you, yes.
Yeah.
And my family isn't always cooperative, my brother, so I wish celiac disease on my brother. And then he told
Poor brother.
Then he told me he wasn't as sensitive as he could have been. So some families, most of the time, people will come with their own food. I'm going to an event in a week or so, and I'm going to a restaurant, and they don't have anything. I'm going to have to bring my own food, and that's awkward. It's awkward. So you reaching out is the number one best thing, and then having things for every course, from appetizer, entree, dessert. Don't have things where they're not going to have to. We can take care of you, and you're giving them a plain baked potato and a grilled chicken cutlet, and everybody else is having all the trimmings.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really requires you to do some preparation if you have to travel outside the country or travel long distance.
A little bit of research.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit better as you learn about it. All the gluten, there's gluten intolerance groups. There's the Celiac Support Association and the gluten intolerance group of North America. I'm actually the chair of the Long Island chapter.
Okay.
And they show the support groups throughout the country, and you can contact a support group and ask for help when you're traveling.
So I know that there is certain websites that will give you what restaurants I can go to that has gluten-free options for me. Is there such thing for someone that has a gluten-free allergy?
Okay, so, and by the way, you can have a gluten-free allergy too, so that's another one. So
right.
You could be allergic to gluten, you could be intolerant to gluten,
right.
You could have celiac disease,
yeah.
And you could just have digestive issues. There are apps and things that like this Find Me Gluten Free is one of the apps that's very widely used, but you still have to call the restaurant and ask questions. You still have to call.
So you still have to kind of, and this is something that I can empathize on some level because I have a nut allergy. So I'm highly allergic to walnuts. So even when I travel, so I know what you're saying, when I travel on the airplane, I have to make sure that what I'm being served has no tree nuts that, the food was put together and, the how they put the food together. And sometimes the presence of the tree nuts can cause that reaction if you have a sensitivity towards the nut.
And you just brought out something that's so important. A lot of the gluten-free products, they use nuts is part of instead of the flours.
Right.
So there's almond meal and walnut meal and things like that in there. And most people with nut allergies look for the nuts, and if they don't see the nuts, they think they're okay.
Yeah.
So you really do need to inform in more than one level when you're putting things out.
Yeah. So do you find that this is very prevalent in the older adult? As you age, you become more intolerant to gluten?
So it depends. Okay, so as you get older, lots of parts wear down.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a pre-existing gastrointestinal issue that's just generally an issue that you've had most of your life, not diagnosed with anything, and as you get older, your system gets worse and your digestive system's worse, gluten is hard to digest because it's a very large protein, as is dairy, and sometimes in some individuals it may cause a little bit more of an issue. Whereas, you can get celiac disease and gluten at any point in your lifespan. You could be 90, you could be 12, you could be 2. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity tends to show up more in older adults. Mm-hmm.
So this is a good time to take a break. This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and I'm talking today with Marlisa Brown about gluten-free allergies. So we'll be right back after this short message.
Technology moves at the speed of innovation, and today, that's lightning fast. So when you get your hands on the latest tech, don't forget to do the right thing with your old devices. Recycle them. The Consumer Technology Association and its members are making recycling your old tech device as easy as purchasing new ones. Just go to greenergadgets.org, type in your zip code, and you'll instantly find the responsible recycling location closest to your home. You'll also find lots of tips to simplify your recycling, like asking the store where you buy your new TV if they'll haul away your old one. Television sets, video game consoles, smartphones, tablets. They're all recyclable. Don't let them clog up your local landfill. Just visit greenergadgets.org. You're sharp enough to get the latest tech tools into your home. Now be responsible enough to get your old devices to the recycler. That's greenergadgets.org.
90.3 WHPC.
We now return to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
And welcome back to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today our special guest is Marlisa Brown. And she is talking today about celiac disease and gluten-free diets. So tell me, welcome back, Marlisa.
Thank you.
Tell me, when it comes down to a gluten-free diet, is there a difference between celiac disease and an allergy to gluten?
Okay, yes, that's a really great question. So when somebody is allergic to something, it's more of it's like an autoimmune kind of not even autoimmune, let's say histamine response.
Right.
Like you've heard of it when somebody got bitten by a bee and you have to run for that EpiPen because it's like an allergy. Some people have severe allergies when they react to something, and some people have mild allergies. So when you have an allergy, it's a totally different response in your body than when you have an intolerance or when you have an autoimmune disease. So gluten-free products, you had mentioned earlier, you asked me about the labeling, and we mentioned that they do have gluten-free labeling now. Well, this is an really interesting point. You can process wheat to remove the gluten, but so it could be marked gluten-free, but it still could have the wheat in it, which triggers somebody that had a wheat allergy. So a lot of the restaurants might look in the back and say, well, this says gluten-free. This is good for you when you say you have a wheat allergy, because they don't necessarily understand the difference between wheat allergy. Well, you don't hear much about rye and barley, but wheat is one of the top 8 allergens.
Yes.
So wheat allergy versus gluten issue are two different things.
So we talked about the older adult with celiac disease or gluten allergy or intolerance. How does this translate into children or teenagers that may have or need a gluten-free diet? How do they manage this?
So there's a few things here. I mean, and we were going to talk a little about diagnosis. A lot of times, sometimes with the teenagers, there's a delay in diagnosis because sometimes they don't want to go for the tests that are necessary to find out. So there's a delay. When they get diagnosed, you got to think about the social issues with teenagers. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're out with your friends, you're hanging out on the corner, let's get something to eat. You know, you're like trying to be cool. You know, maybe you're not the coolest kid in the group, and then, you know, there's a guy you like or there's a girl that somebody else likes, and oh, no, I can't eat that. Yeah. You know, they're going to eat stuff that they're not supposed to. When I say stuff, I mean stuff, because that's what kids eat. They eat everything.
Right.
Because they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be different. They want to be part of the group. I mean, I had the same thing with diabetics that don't want to wear the insulin pump because they don't want to have something on their body because they don't want to stand out.
It's a body image.
Yes,
sure.
Body image, social image. Mm-hmm. I'm not cool anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you suggest for this population?
So the first thing that we have to do is get the child, you know, with the teenager, you know, with the parent and talk to them. Mm-hmm. Find out what it is that they miss. What do they find the biggest issues for them? What are the things that they like to eat? What do they like to do when they're out with their friends? And then we need to come up with options instead of. So like they may say, where do you live? And they say, and they usually go to this pizza places. And then I might do some research to find out if there's a pizza place that they could get some gluten-free pizza out when they're out with their friends, or if there's something they could bring with them when they're out with their friends, or which places make sandwiches or have bread when they're out with their friends. So they could just make a suggestion. Hey, let's go to this restaurant, Pete's Diner or whatever it is, because they know they can order safely there. Instead of making them have a thing with their friends, no, I can't eat there, no, I can't eat there kind of thing.
So as a registered dietitian, I know a large part of what you do is teaching. And so when it comes down to the parent of that teenager or child, it's really their responsibility now to educate the child, to educate, not now they're going to school. How do we manage eating in the school?
And, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned parents, because some parents aren't as cooperative as they could be. So, like, in other words, their kid can't have it, but they're still eating it. And I use the term, if it's there, it's not fair. So, in other words, you're the parent. Don't be going and bringing your kid's favorite black and white cookies into the house and say to them, well, you know, you're not supposed to eat that. So that's, first we have to resolve the home situation and stop cross-contaminating the peanut butter and things like that. Right. So first we got to fix that, because sometimes you have really, really, really wonderful supportive families, and sometimes you have, well, the other kids are here, they should be allowed to eat what they want attitudes.
Right.
Then when it comes to the school, there's different levels. Is the kid on the school lunch plan?
Right.
Okay, do they have the resources and the money to buy the products? Gluten-free products and the bread family are very expensive. Does the school understand how to provide it?
Yeah, I was thinking, are schools providing gluten-free? I know nut allergies is a big thing.
Well, they're required to, because it's part of the disability. If you have a diagnosis of celiac disease, they're required to as part of the Disability Act. The celiac falls there. But does that mean that they're providing it? And what is their idea of providing it? Are they going to give them the same exact thing every day to eat? Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing. Are they cross-contaminating it in the kitchen? There's going to take... What are they doing for parties and events? Are they giving you a heads up so you can bring in cupcakes for your kid too? Mm-hmm. What about a school trip and they're on the bus and they have little boxes of things when other parents are bringing in things? So there's lots of little levels of things that have to be addressed, and you really do need a very proactive parent. Very much so.
So if a parent, for example, wants to know whether their child has a gluten allergy, what can they do to test to see whether they, in fact, their child has a gluten allergy?
For an allergy, you're not talking about celiac and non-celiac.
Allergy.
So then you want to go to a board-certified allergist. You want to look up a board-certified allergist, because there's different types of tests. They have blood tests. They have RAS skin tests. There's level. I mean, I'm really allergic to mango. I mean, I get hives. I mean, oh my God. I had to call the hotel doctor one time because of it. And yet when I went to even a board-certified allergist, the initial blood test came back negative. And you can get false positives in allergies too. 50% of the tests are false positive. So you want to make sure, when I'm going to go to somebody, it's the best possible person, because they can tell me what to do. When I asked the allergist, I said, well, what do I do? He goes, well, I could do RAS tests and keep, test your skin and see. Right. I said, so that what you suggest? He goes, no, don't eat mangoes. Here's an EpiPen. Okay. So it really is relative too, but you want a specialist for that.
You do want a specialist. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHBD PC. And today our special guest is Marlisa Brown. Marlisa, this is a very interesting conversation that we're having about celiac disease and gluten sensitivities, intolerances, and allergies. How can the listening audience contact you?
Okay, so I have an office in Comac. It's actually on Comac Road in Deer Park. So it's 375 Comac Road in Deer Park. And my phone number is 631-666-4297. Or they can go to my website. It's T as in Tom, the word wellness.net.
Now, are there any support groups in the community for people who have celiac disease or gluten issues?
Yes, actually, there's an excellent group, the Gluten Intolerance Group in North America in Long Island. We have GIG of LI, longisland.org. We're having a big meeting tonight. I'm the chair of it.
Wow.
We've been having Dr. Lip come down and talk to us about differences in celiac. We have meetings almost every month. We have events. We talk to them about travel, about dining out. So it's the Gluten Intolerance Group of Long Island. Really great support group, and it's only there to help. That's the only purpose. It's a nonprofit, and it's only there to help others.
And everyone is invited, family who may be dealing with a child who has celiac disease or gluten intolerances, and the person themselves.
So if somebody joins for the year, I think it's $20 for the year, and they can bring family members with them. If somebody comes just as a guest, for a meeting, I think it's $5 or something like that, and sometimes we even have free events.
Mm-hmm. So for someone who has celiac disease or gluten intolerances or gluten allergies, is there a medication or something that they can take to assuage the symptoms?
So that's a great question. Okay, really great. So first off, no. Okay, but okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting all excited now about this question. For allergies, absolutely not.
Right.
For celiac disease, they are doing research, but the research is only showing positive results, but only to reduce symptoms in the case of cross-contamination, not free flow, eat the whole pizza. For non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is absolutely definitely not celiac, they're finding sometimes certain things can help, but not for celiac and not for food allergy on gluten ever. Right now, anyhow.
So this is very informative. Now, if if I have, or if I think I have a gluten intolerance or a gluten allergy, and I am going, you kind of touched on this, and I'm going to a restaurant or I'm going to a friend's house, the first thing that I want to do is plan and bring my own food.
Well, it's in your thought process.
It's in your thought process.
So, like, depending on how close I am to you, like if I'm a really close relative and you know I have the problem, I might call you up and say, listen, last time I was at your house, you only had green beans. Can we talk about the menu? Because you're my really close friend. But if I don't know you that well and I don't feel comfortable bringing that up, one of the things I can do is offer to bring some things. I can call you and say, listen, let me bring an appetizer and a dessert or something. So this way I know there's something safe that's there for me, and yet it will be good for everybody else too. Something delicious, that everybody else will enjoy. Bring it on your own platter, because people, if you don't do that, tend to take the other things and put it together. They'll move things. A helpful person.
Right.
If I'm going to a restaurant, I call ahead. I talk to them. So if I call up, I go, hello, hi, I want to know if you have anything gluten-free. And somebody screams out, hey, Joey, do we have anything gluten-free? Glue. She wants to know if we have glue. No, it's not a good place. Bring my own food.
Bring your own food.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about gluten-free allergies, again, we have to really think ahead of the game. If I probably suspected that I am a gluten insensitive or having gluten intolerance, what are some of the main things that I could do first to eliminate from my diet? I know that it is wheat. How can I begin to eliminate this from my diet? If I sense that I have a lot of bloating, or I have this kind of indigestion, what is the first thing that I can rid from my diet to kind of be able to self-diagnose, or would you suggest that?
Well, so the first thing I suggest is, if you're having gastrointestinal problems, is to see a gastrointestinal doctor, just to make sure there's nothing serious, especially if there's bleeding or weight loss or pain or things that can trigger something symptom. Really serious. Yeah. Then after that, if they said to you that no, we don't find anything serious or anything else, you don't have celiac disease, we checked you, and you can be misdiagnosed with that, but let's say that you don't have it, the first thing you want to do is, if you want to see if it's a reaction for you, is to completely take it out for like a week. And see and measure your symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10. And usually if you're gluten sensitive and you take it out completely, if that's your problem, it will go away. It could be something else, which we're not going to talk about on this show, but I will mention there's something that's all over the place right now that's called FODMAP, low FODMAP, and sometimes GI symptoms, again, when you don't have a diagnosis, come from that, and we'll talk about that a different day and place, but I just want to throw it out there. But if you do have a gluten sensitivity and you completely remove gluten, that means even a crumb, you should have an immediate response and immediate improvement. If you have immediate improvement, but it's not 100%, there's something else you're missing. But don't do that until you're sure you don't have anything wrong with you, just to be safe.
So does probiotics help?
So, probiotics, there are different strains of bacteria, and probiotics support sometimes the microbiome that live in our gut. But there's so many different strains of probiotics. You really, they do some stool sampling and they check to see what your imbalance is. But if you just randomly take them, it may not even be a good strain or the right species for you. So you may be taking something that you might have too much of already. So you really got to be careful, because sometimes certain types of probiotics can actually cause like overgrowth of things that you already have too much of already. So you have to be careful. I usually recommend, the better brands, and usually the more expensive ones are the better products when we do go there.
So thank you, Marlisa, for this very dynamic, informative session. And I hope you can come back to talk to us more about this information that you wanted to share with us.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Marlisa Brown, for talking to us about celiac disease and a gluten-free diet. And this is Jeanine Cook-Garard signing off, and thank you for listening to this edition of Your Family's Health.